2023 was the year of the sweeper. Baseball Savant even came up with a new pitch classification for it. Usage of the pitch almost doubled compared to 2020. Last season, it was the year of the splitter. We saw the largest year-over-year jump the pitch has had probably in the history of the sport after years of stagnation. And yeah, a percentage point increase seems immaterial, but the league saw more splitters last year, 2 weeks before the All-Star break, than it did in all of either 2021 or 2022. So what will 2025 bring in terms of MLB trends? I have two theories that we're about to deep dive on. I'll be honest, the first one I didn't even think was going to be in this video until I stumbled on first round pick Chase Burns throwing a bullpen with the Reds, and I noticed a small little black band on his throwing arm. I decided to quote tweet it and saw the response it was getting. And then I saw it again, this time on Spencer Strider. What if 2025 is the year of the wearable workload monitor? Yeah, I know it doesn't sound that exciting, but I'm here to convince you otherwise. See, that black band on the arm of Burns or Strider houses a small device known as a driveline pulse sensor. I believe there are a few other competitors in the market. I'm not certain what both of these guys are using, but Pulse is pretty popular. What this monitor attempts to do is put an objective number on a pitcher's throwing workload for a given day. It does this through measuring things like arm torque, arm speed, your slot, and shoulder rotation. Think of it as a very fancy specific Whoop or Aura ring, which are both pretty popular consumer products that track fatigue, sleep, stress, etc. But Pulse is for a very specific and important part of your body if you're a pitcher. Every season from early March through April, there's a groan that reverberates throughout baseball among fans and even media when inevitably their favorite pitcher who throws hard goes down with an arm injury. So much so that this past offseason, the league put out a memo highlighting the issue but not providing much of a path forward. To me, this device is a path forward. See, that workload score that you get becomes an input for a throwing program. And it's also part of an important calculation known as acute to chronic workload ratio, or AC ratio, which I won't dive into here, but it aims to monitor what level of fitness a player has built up with his throwing and then gauge his ability to accept different kinds of workload, whether it be 25, 50, 75, or 100 pitches. While I did say in my tweet that I was curious when we'd see this in MLB games, the real value of Pulse and workload monitors like it is that it measures non-game throwing volume, which accounts for the vast majority of throws a pitcher makes in a given week. Hawkeye and Kinetrax are two devices that are running in most MLB games depending on the team, and they do a good job of providing variables for a team internally to then create a model around what a pitcher's workload score is in a given game. But on the other hand, if you're a player who's on a team that doesn't do a good job of workload tracking and you want to use a device like this in a Major League Baseball game, you actually can. Pulses are approved for use in Major League Baseball games. It's an expensive process, apparently, to get a device like this approved in the first place, but one that the co-founder of Driveline Baseball and now special assistant with the Red Sox, Kyle Bodie, thinks more companies like this will adopt as they see the ROI tick up alongside player adoption. Seeing these devices in spring training on players throwing off mounds and in flat ground suggests that players might be warming up to devices like this, which could over time have a material impact on injury rates. The collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, between the league and player association prevents teams from forcing players to wear things like this. So for this to grow, it has to happen at the amateur and collegiate levels and trickle up such that when those guys eventually become big leaguers, it's everywhere. I do think there's a workload reckoning coming where organizations that aren't locked in on objective tracking of workloads like this start to see elevated injury rates in the major leagues as well as the minor leagues. And as a byproduct of that, I think in the rest of this spring training as well as subsequent spring trainings, we'll see more of these devices on players. They'll become commonplace. But that gets to the point of this video, right? What is the big trend for 2025? I think we're a year or two too early on calling it the year of the wearable workload monitor, as I said. So what do I actually think it is? This is something I kind of teased in a prior video, but given it's spring training and we're starting to hear about pitchers adding new pitches, it's time for me to put my stamp on it. 2025 is the year of the pitch mix, and what I mean by that is that diversity of arsenals, specifically in starting pitchers, will see the largest year-over-year increase since 2016. I think the league is starting to realize the importance of mixed diversity. We're even getting some public stats that are trying to isolate the value of an entire arsenal as opposed to the value of an individual pitch like Stuff Plus does. How we measure this take of mine might be tricky, but we can set some minimums like 2,000 pitches thrown and 100 times throwing an individual pitch for it to count. We can plug this all into Baseball Savant and see what it spits out. The average starting pitcher had 4.7 pitches last season, which is actually part of a 3-year increase prior to which it stayed pretty stagnant around 4.4 pitches per starter. If I want to actually nail this take, then I have to assume the rate of growth increases. So I'll predict that we break the 5-pitch mark under these same parameters, which would be the greatest increase year over year in the last 8 seasons. What I think solidified this for me was seeing over the weekend that Paul Skenes, of all people, the guy who posted a 1.96 ERA in 133 innings last season, who already throws 5 pitches, is adding another 2 pitches, a cutter and a running 2-seam fastball. I think the intent with the 2-seam is a plate coverage weapon. We don't even have to dive too deep into the data here. Just look at his approach versus right-handed hitters. He throws his 4-seam fastball away, and he elevates it with 2 strikes. His splinker is mostly down and in. His sweeper and slider are both down away from righties, with his slider catching more of the plate, and his curveball is down away as well. So where's the only portion of the zone where he's not covering? It's up and in. What fits up and in? A running 2-seam fastball. It'll probably sit about 98 miles per hour because everything he throws is crazy hard. And my guess is that it'll have a shape of 9 inches of induced vertical break and about 17 inches of arm side run, a subtle diversion from his 4-seam fastball, which is 11 inches of vertical break and 14 inches of arm side run. And how about the cutter? Well, against left-handed hitters, Skenes kind of covers everything. His 4-seam is inside early and up late, splinker is down away, curveball's down, changeup's also down away, and he has a slider. He just doesn't throw it a lot to lefties. That is also mostly down in the zone. I don't think he's going to move his fastball location away to allow for a cutter inside. What he could do is kind of play a 2 fastball game on the inner third of the plate, locating both his cutter and his 4-seam inside, but that would be pretty unorthodox. It could also be a cutter shape that turns into more of a gyro ball pitch that he can throw down into lefties, which is a spot he doesn't really pitch to a ton. Whatever happens, Skenes' intent is probably to not throw his fastball as much as he did last season, so he's adding pitches that can replace fastball usage and counts where he's most inclined to allow fastball damage. But it's not just Paul Skenes. Top pitching prospect Jackson Jobe is adding a pair of pitches this offseason as well, a sinker and a curveball. I presume a sinker to help him out with his 4-seam fastball playing down to right-handed hitters last season, and a curveball because he could spin the ball above 3,000 rotations per minute, and if you can do that and you don't have 2 or 3 breaking balls, you gotta look yourself in the mirror. We haven't even had a full week of spring games yet, and there are other young pitchers adding things. Max Myers adding a sinker and a sweeper. Christopher Sanchez is adding something, whatever that means. Casey Mize broke his slider into 2 shapes. I'm sure by the middle of March, this list here will more than triple with new pitches among young arms. You can argue this year of the pitch mix stuff is a Trojan horse for stop throwing your 4-seam fastball a ton, but I'd argue that the rate of decay at which we've seen the league stop using 4-seam fastballs has kind of slowed over the last few seasons. This makes me think that the year of the pitch mix is really more about the league starters finding a floor for fastball usage and maybe a ceiling for slider usage, and realizing that the edge is in peripheral pitches like sinkers, cutters, curveballs, and even secondary sliders. And as you can see with Paul Skenes and Jackson Jobe, it's the young guys who are catalysts for this expanding pitch mix stuff, which I think is really important because as we look maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, perhaps this is the moment in time at which everybody coming into the league who survives as a starting pitcher has at minimum 5 or 6 good pitches, especially with the prevalence of pitch design. I watched some college baseball on opening weekend and was kind of stunned to see how much good stuff there was. And I imagine how many organizations are already looking at those guys and going, okay, pretty easy to add 2 or 3 pitches to this guy and project him as a starting pitcher. So I like the wearables angle in terms of workload monitoring. I'm always going to try to sneak that in and talk about pitcher health, but maybe we're a year off from that. So I'm convinced this is the year of the pitch mix, but I'm curious what you think. If you made it to the end of the video, I want to know what you think it's the year of, whether it's a specific pitch, specific team, some other league-wide trend. Maybe it's the year of the hitter. But this channel, we generally talk about pitching. So I'm not going to throw out many hitter takes here. But as always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the start of spring training and the start of the regular season.